word and is the name of the 8th verse of the Quran and means spoiled. Saddam Hussein proudly named his campaign as Anfal to show that he was similar to Prophet Muhammad, who launched his campaign against the infidels. And the infidels in Saddam's eyes were the Kurds. So Anfal operation, if I define it, Anfal operations were a series of horrific attacks carried out by Iraqi army against the rural Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan from 23rd of February, and it lasted 197 days and ended on 6th of September. So in other words, Anfal was planned by the Iraqi leadership in Baghdad and implemented by Ali al-Majid. So if I talk about the demons from hell, i.e. the forces that participated in Anfal, you can just imagine the number of forces and the number of brigades and the Iraqi Air Force that participated in Anfal to eliminate the rural Kurds. I don't want to go in detail. And as I said, Anfal lasted 197 days and it covered all the geographical area of Iraqi Kurdistan, and it was completed in 8 stages. Stage by stage, if you look at it, if you look at the first stage of Anfal, you see that the first stage started on 23rd of February 1988 and it lasted and finished on 19th of March 1988. And the region was north of Sulaymaniyah. Why that place was chosen? Because that place hosted the Politburo of Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, their main hospital, their main prison, and the main radio station. So they wanted to, as Saddam was explaining to his commanders, to crush the head of the snake, then it would be easy to cut off the rest of the body. So they wanted to attack that area and get rid of the leadership of Patriotic Union of Kurdistan and any other party forces in that area. But the surprising thing was on 16th of March, during that first stage of Anfal, the chemical attack on the town of Halabja attacked to suppress a fear and a panic among the Peshmerga, the guerrilla who were struggling and were resisting, and the villagers who were living in the prohibited area. So that Halabja attack was the biggest blow to the Kurds. But fortunately for that area, there was no prey. In other words, there was no victim. No one was arrested by the Iraqi army to be killed later, because that area was on the border with Iran, and all the villagers, most of the villagers, they managed to get to Iran, although that some of them froze to death in the snowy corridors and icy corridors of Iran and Afghanistan. And when we talk about the second Anfal started 4 days or 5 days after the beginning of the first Anfal, and it started covering the south of Sulaymaniyah. North and northwest of Sulaymaniyah was finished, then it started in the south of Sulaymaniyah. And the timing of the attack was just to recollect all the army forces and units to go and attack those areas. And in every stage of Anfal, by the way, there was the use of chemical weapons. And the Iraqi government or the Iraqi army was choosing the biggest village in that region to attack it. So the start of every stage of Anfal was with a chemical attack on the biggest village in the area, again to spread a panic among the villagers and to fall the maximum number of victims as a result of the chemical attack. So that one, again, if you look at it, it lasted about 10 days, and many thousands of people were arrested during the second stage of Anfal, because people either stayed within their villages and surrounding their villages in the valleys and the mountains, or they sneaked to the towns. But even those who managed to get to the towns and the cities, the Iraqi security forces managed to capture them, and those tens of thousands of people were sent to a camp called Probzawa near the city of Kirkuk, and from there they were sent to the fate and destination, which was the massacre. And immediately after the finish of the second Anfal, the third stage of Anfal started, and it started in the month of April, from 7th of April, and it lasted 2 weeks until 20th of April. And the third Anfal covered all the Germian area, i.e. north of Iraq and south of Kirkuk and west of Kirkuk and south of Sulaymaniyah. It's a very large area that covered during that stage of Anfal, and this was the darkest day of recent Kurdish history because tens of thousands of men, women and children were either killed on the spot, around their villages, or they were rounded up by the Iraqi army and they were sent to Tabzawa, and from Tabzawa to the massacre. That's why no wonder you see that 14th of April is the day that's been allocated by the Kurds to commemorate the Anfal campaign, because during that stage of Anfal, the maximum or the largest number of people were arrested and executed. Then when the third stage of Anfal finished, then the Iraqi army thought about moving their campaign towards Erbil area. So what they chose the bridge between Kirkuk, Sulaimani area and Erbil area, and that area was north of Kirkuk and south east of the town of Kosinja in the area of what they call Kashwan. And again, that area was attacked by all the Iraqi army that were massed over there, and chemical attack was used on the village of Kogrtoove, which is the biggest village again in that area. And again, that stage of about tens of thousands of men, women and children were arrested and never seen again. By the end of fourth stage of Anfal, all the areas around Kirkuk and Sulaimania were finished and no village was standing at the time, and then they started their attack on Erbil area. But Erbil area is a very mountainous area. They have very large terrain of mountains and three big valleys. So the Iraqi army could not finish the whole area in one stage of Anfal. That's why they combined the three stages of Anfal, 5th, 6th and 7th, in those three different valleys, and they finished the capture of the last village in that area on the 6th of August 1988. And fortunately for that, again, because that area, the guerrilla forces, they resisted the Iraqi army advanced in the area. Most of the villages either sneaked into the towns or managed to escape to Iran. So again, in these three stages of Anfal, not many people were arrested or killed, apart from a curfew imposed on the town of Ravanduz during that stage of Anfal, and the Iraqi army and security police, they managed to capture as much as they could in the town of Ravanduz, and they were obviously executed. The thing that happened during those three stages of Anfal, if you recall the history, on 2nd of August 1988, Iran agreed to ceasefire with Iraq. So during that period where people were hoping that maybe the area of Erbil and Duhok could resist the Anfal operation, but Iran agreed to ceasefire with Iraq, so all the Iraqi forces were free and have the upper hand now to go and move their units towards Kurdistan and continue their operation and Anfal operation to finish off the job that they designed to do. And after that, obviously, the final stage of Anfal started, which is in Bardinan area. We call it Bardinan. It's part of Erbil governorate and the whole governorate of Duhok. And that one, the Iraqi government called it final Anfal. And during that stage of Anfal, again, it lasted for a few days only, about 5-6 days. And again, thousands of men, actually, men, women and children were arrested during that stage of Anfal. But fortunately, for some ambiguous reasons to the moment, the men were separated from women and children, and only the men were from the camp or the camp of Nizakeh. They were registered, and only the men were sent to Sulamiya, which is south of Mosul, and from there they were executed. But the women and children, they spared that execution. And fortunately, after that, after the 3rd of September, on 6th of September and 7th of September, Iraq and Saddam Hussein issued an amnesty by which many people who fled to Turkey or to Iran, they managed to go back and surrender to the Iraqis, and they spared their lives. And many thousands of people who were hiding in the valleys and caves surrounding their villages, they managed to surrender again, and they fled. But by the end of September, 6th September, we see that by then, tens of thousands of men, women and children were disappeared, and you see that Halabja was attacked with chemical weapons, and around 6,000 people were killed by using chemical weapons in Halabja and the rest of the Kurdistan, and tens of thousands were maimed. During Anfal campaign, 2,240 villages were razed down in 6 months, and the rural part of Iraqi Kurdistan was destroyed completely. Then after that, we have no hope and nothing to think about in a positive way, because all the Kurds, all the villagers who were rounded up and sterilized, they were forced to live in 81 camps near the main city in Kurdistan, and the rural Kurdistan was completely destroyed. And the international community, as one of my colleagues in the morning mentioned that, unfortunately they were silent with all the atrocities and the crimes against the Kurds. But Saddam Hussein, luckily, he occupied Kuwait, with all due respect to the lives of the lost in that fight. So the international community, now they realize how dangerous Saddam Hussein and what danger he imposed on its own people and the neighboring countries. So they intervened and they took it out of Kuwait, and subsequently there was an uprising in the south, they call it the Shabaniya uprising, and in Kurdistan as well. The uprising, and when Saddam had the upper hand again after he was kicked out from Kuwait, they started crushing the two uprisings, but in Kurdistan he could not do as he could in the south, and we had that exodus, and everybody knows that, and remember the images on the TV stations and on the media, and after that you realize that the state haven was created in Kurdistan, and Saddam Hussein never had that chance to go back to Kurdistan and crush the Kurdish movement and kill more people in the areas where we were not under control. And you see that it lasted until 2003 when Saddam was toppled, and as I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, a new democratic state of Iraq is established now, and the Kurds are participating in the state of Iraq, and hopefully in implementing the constitution which serves the whole Iraqi people, all the components of the Iraqi government. And you heard probably on the 16th of March, last week, the Iraqi parliament agreed on a decision or recommendation to consider the attack on Halabja, the chemical attack on Halabja, as part of the crime of genocide. And we hope that the Iraqi government will follow the suit, and the whole international community and United Nations follow the suit, and recognize that Anfal Capital and Halabja Capital, the crime of genocide, with all the implications of that definition and that